that meeting between Starmer and Biden, you mentioned that you don't know who has changed the Biden's decision not to send long-range missiles to Ukraine. Then later on we learned it was Pentagon decided to do that. But who did that, Scott? In your opinion, was Lloyd Austin, and what information they've received based on that those information they have decided not to send long range missiles to Ukraine.
Well, Lloyd Austin had already made this decision based upon assessments from the Pentagon. I think September 6th, I could be off on that date. He went to the 24th iteration of the Ramstein contact group. That's where they all get together, the Americans, the Europeans, the Ukrainians, and they talk about what's next in terms of supplying support. And at that time, Zelensky had come in making a heavy pitch for U.S. permission to use ATACMS and Storm Shadows. And Austin said, no, there's no such thing as a silver bullet. And he said something else. He said, this war is going to end through negotiations, not by, applying, magical weapons. So that was a big no. And one of the reasons is that it was escalatory in nature, needlessly provocative, and not going to change the outcome. But that appeared to be policy coming from the Pentagon. Apparently, the State Department had different point of view. Tony Blinken now is flying, or not, taking a train to Kiev, and he's saying the whole time, our policy is that Ukraine will win this war. And the president's saying, we'll win this war. And remember, the definition of victory is strategic defeat of Russia, which, given the fact that Russia is a nuclear power, strategic defeat means you'll automatically trigger their nuclear doctrine and the world ends. So it's a stupid suicidal policy to begin with, but that's our policy, the defeat of Russia, victory for Ukraine. And he and his the foreign secretary of England go to there. And again, the press, remember, the press doesn't invent stuff all the time. On occasion, they're told, what's going to happen. And the press the gaggle that's following these guys was told that Blinken and Lammy are going to sit down and they're going to give the green light for Ukraine to use these weapons. And Ukraine fully expected that. And then Blinken comes out and gives some wishy-washy language about now's not the time, we're not going to do this, or because I think Austin went to the White House and said, "What are you doing?" And so then the president said, Jake Sullivan came in and said, this will be handled by executive decision, because we got the Pentagon, the State Department, they're not talking with each other, policy disconnect. The White House is going to take this over. Jake Sullivan in charge. And Keir Starmer now is going to fly to New York to Washington, D.C. and meet with Biden at the White House. And Keir Starmer comes off with his red briefcase. It's got all the plans and everything. Remember, Zelensky and the British had already worked out the targeting. Zelensky had the targets. He was trying to sell the targets. The British had the targets. Remember what I'm saying. The British had the targets. What's that tell the Russians? Who's attacking what? It's the British attacking them using American intelligence. That's what the Russians said all along. But he came in. The whole thing was Russia's bluffing, Russia's bluffing, Russia's bluffing. And Biden was ready to do on this. He was told, this is what we're going to do. Sullivan told him everything okay. The Russians are bluffing. They all heard Putin speak on Thursday night, and they went, he's bluffing. Suddenly you have the ambassador, the Russian ambassador to the United Nations, in session at the Security Council of the United Nations, basically say this will be a declaration of war. He said that to the world. And now Biden's like, well, what does that mean, declaration? I don't. And then Anatoly Antonov says, if you think you can avoid nuclear conflict and limit it just to Europe, think what I'm just saying right there. If you think you can avoid a nuclear conflict and limit it just to Europe, you're wrong. You will get burned. Your fingers will get burned. And now they're going, what does that mean? And so the White House calls its intermediaries, all the former government officials who, because they're not in government, maintain some sort of, casual connectivity with the Russians. And they all call Anatoly Antonov and say, what do you mean by that? He said, what do you think I mean? The president's word were quite clear. Don't play with fire. And they all start calling Sullivan saying, this is a problem. The Russians aren't bluffing. They appear to be serious about this. and Biden had to pull the plug on signing the documents. I personally believe there was also a back channel, probably through the Pentagon, maybe through the CIA, maybe through both, where the Russians. Let me give you an example. If you remember back in the fall of 2022, when Ukraine launched its big counterattack in Kharkov, and the Russians fell back and they recaptured Kherson, everybody in the West was saying Russia's going to use a nuclear weapon because they're so desperate. To, total misanalysis. But they said Russia can use a nuke. The United States used the back channel to Russia, and they didn't just say don't do it. They said if you do it, this will happen. We will strike you using conventional weapons, but it'll be a massive strike designed to, destroy communications, logistics, command and control. We're coming in hard. It's a guarantee. We're not going to nuke you, but if you use nuclear weapons against Ukraine, NATO is going to hit you hard conventionally, and this is how we're going to do it. I think the Russians went, thanks for that intelligence. We weren't planning on nuking them anyways, but hey, that's your thing. But my point is, this channel isn't just about issuing soft warnings. The channel is about issuing very detailed warnings. And I have a feeling that the Russians went to them and said, if this happens, this is what we're going to do. I don't know what they were going to do. I don't think it was going to be nuclear. I think it was going to be conventional, but I think it would have been involved strategic weapons, avant-gardes, Kinzhals, zircons. I was in I did I guess it was a space, as they call it, on X. And the deputy ambassador to the United Nations for Russia, Mr. Ambassador Polyansky, was there. And I postulated my theories about Russian doctrine, et cetera. And he said, look, I can't talk about it for obvious reasons. But he said, I will tell you right now that you won't get any disagreement from any Russians about what you just said. So I feel comfortable with what I'm saying. I think the Russians made it clear that there would be consequences. And the problem is, once you get into this tit for tat, because if Russia then, you remember how the NATO said we're going to hit Russia hard with conventional? I think Russia came back and said we're going to hit you hard with conventional. And then what happens? Article 5 is triggered. And Putin already said, he told Macron, he told everybody else, once NATO triggers Article 5, we're at war. And it will go nuclear. 72 hours later, we're all dead. So I think that's what happened. And unfortunately, I got to run because